All right, welcome to week 3 of logic. We are now starting in on the part where we actually start building a logical system, a formal logical system. So the first 3 chapters were introducing ideas about logic and critical thinking in general, and now we are specifically starting to build a logical system. This is an attempt to create a model of arguing in the real world that's more abstract. And what we're doing is we are giving ourselves some content neutrality by replacing some of the ordinary words in English in ordinary English with abstract symbols. And again, as I emphasized in the videos on formal logic and the nature of formal logic, the goal for this is to create a symbolic system that is completely free of ambiguity and wears its logical structure on its face, so that once we separate out from the content that we're arguing about, we can just look at the mechanisms of reasoning on their own. So what I want to do now is to look at an ordinary English sentence. And what we're going to do is we're going to transform it into our symbolic, purely logical language. The first symbolic language that we're creating, by the way, is called SL. That stands for sentential logic, and we'll talk more about the details of how that works and why we're calling it that shortly. But let's just first begin by thinking about what it means to replace aspects of ordinary English with symbols. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by taking this sentence, "It is raining," and replace it with the letter A. In the system we are developing, individual letters stand for statements. And remember, a statement is a unit of language that can be true or false. And so if you look at "it is raining," that is enough language to say that it's true or false. And earlier this morning it was true, now it is false. We're just going to call that A. We're going to call B, "it is snowing." Right? We have 2 sentences in this larger, we have 2 statements in this larger sentence. We are actually calling these smaller statements, A and B, atomic statements. We call them atomic statements because you can't divide them up any farther and still get something that is a statement, right? So if you split off "it is" or "raining," neither of those on its own could be true or false. Between the "it is raining" and the "it is snowing," there's the word "or." And this is going to be something that connects 2 statements. And we're going to represent the word "or" with this little V. We call it a disjunction symbol. It is what we call a sentential connective because it connects 2 statements. Right? So this is how our formal language is going to work. We have sentence letters, A, B, and C. Also, to ensure that we have an infinity of possible sentence letters, we're going to allow subscripts. So we can talk about A1, A2, A3, etc. This gives us as many sentences as we need. And then we're going to have connectives that link up those letters A, B, and C. And so we'll have a little squiggly line that's a negation. The "and," which is the ampersand. The disjunction you already saw is a V, that's an "or." "If then" is called the conditional, that's represented by an arrow. And then we have a double-headed arrow called the biconditional. And so this is the glue that we use in our language. We have our individual letters, A, B, C, D, and then we clump them together using these connectives. So The language we are creating is fundamentally a written language, and ultimately the goal is for it to be a machine language, something that can be implemented by a machine and done by a machine. But we do have to say it out loud all the time, just in talking to each other, and we continue to use real language, ordinary English. So to understand what's going on here, we need to look at each of these connectives and get some details on them. So there's a little squiggly line. We call that the negation, or not, right? And so if you have a little squiggly line in front of the letter A, you read that as not A. That's how you say that aloud, not A. And what that means is whatever statement A isn't true. The ampersand we just call it a conjunction. It means and. So A ampersand B is read A and B. The V is called the disjunction. If you remember Schoolhouse Rock from when you were a kid, which you don't because you're not my age, you heard that and, but, and or were conjunctions. And actually, we treat or slightly differently. It's called a disjunction. So A, V, B, when you say that out loud, you say A or B. The arrow represents a conditional. If, then B. So if A, then B. And the biconditional is the arrow going in both directions, and when we see it, we read if and only if. So A, double-headed arrow, B is read aloud as A, if and only if B. All right, now think about this sentence. I go to school and I have a job. Just stop for a second and think. How many atomic statements are in this sentence? Just write down an answer on a piece of scrap paper in front of you. Right? You should see that there are two. I go to school is an atomic statement. I have a job is an atomic statement. So you can put those two together with the and you get the representation in our symbolic language SL for I go to school and I have a job. We'd now just say A and B. Now look at this sentence. If my car breaks down, then I won't be able to get to work. Again, this looks like it's got two atomic statements in it. We can say my car breaks down is A, and I won't be able to get to work is B. But we can actually break that down farther because, all right, those two are connected by an if-then, right? But we can break this down farther because I won't be able to get to work is the negation of I will be able to get to work. So the way we actually want to do this, is to say I won't be able to get to work is equivalent to this longer, more awkward sentence. It is not the case that I will be able to get to work. That's an awkward way of putting it, but when we phrase it like this, the syntax of the English actually matches the syntax of the symbolic language. So I will be able to get to work is A, and it is not the case that is the negation, the little squiggly line. So now we can write our full statement like this. A, arrow, little squiggly line, B. If my car breaks down, then I won't be able to get to work. All right. I will get to work if and only if my car works. Again, we've got two atomic statements here. I will get to work and my car works. Connecting them is this phrase, if and only if. and that's represented by the double-headed arrow. The relationship between the double-headed arrow and the single-headed arrow is a little tricky, but once you get used to it, it's not hard to understand at all. So, think about the English sentence, I will go to work if my car works. There, the if in the English comes second, and the I will go to work comes first. So the if is going to be on the left side of the arrow. You want to write that A, arrow, B, because if is the condition, and I will go to work is the thing that results from the condition. The word only is really special. And if you think about the meaning, what you're saying here is that there's exactly one way something is going to happen. I will go to work only if my car works. Now suddenly that reverses the direction of the conditional. In order for me to get to work, it has to be the case that my car has worked. So only is B, arrow, A. You put the if together with the only if, and you get if and only if. I will go to work if and only if my car works. That is A, double-headed arrow, B. All right, here's another example of moving a English sentence into our symbolic language, SL. If it snows, school will be canceled, and we can build a snow fort. Well, that's exciting. So there are 3 atomic statements in this one, right? It says, it snows, school will be canceled, and we can build a snow fort. So if A, then B and C. To represent this more complicated sentence properly, we need to add another element to our symbolic language, the parentheses. In this case, B and C go together as 2 things that would happen if school is canceled, right? So how you place the parentheses is a big deal. A, arrow, parentheses, B and C is not the same as A, arrow, B, and C. In order to read that more properly, A implies B and C is different than A implies B and C. It works just like arithmetic. You're grouping the functions, and you do the functions that are in the parentheses first. So 1 plus 2 times 3 is 7, but 1 plus 2 times 3 is 9, right? The parentheses change the order that you do the operations in. All of our symbolic terms, all of our sentential connectives have some technical vocabulary that goes with them that's useful to know. It makes it easier to refer to the parts of what's going on. So if we say if A, then B, the A is called the antecedent and the B is called the consequent. The 2 sides of an and statement are called conjuncts. A and B. A is the left conjunct, B is the right conjunct. With the or, the 2 sides are called disjuncts. A or B, A is the left disjunct, B is the right disjunct. An important thing to note about the or, the disjunction in our language. In ordinary English, the word or is actually ambiguous. It could mean this or that or both, or sometimes it means this or that, but not both. Both of those options interpretations are open to you if you read a sentence in English. And one of the things I said about our symbolic language is that we are trying to eliminate all ambiguity. So we're going to have to pick one. In this case, we pick the inclusive or. So our V means this or that or both. To understand the way the ambiguity works in English, look at this meme. I either drink coffee or I say bad words to strangers. This is a meme that's popular on social media amongst my friends who tend to all be cranky coffee drinkers. So the intended meaning here is either I drink coffee or I say bad words to strangers, but not both, because the coffee is keeping me from saying bad words from strangers. Now, if I post this online, someone invariably responds, I'm experimenting with doing both. As long as I spill my coffee, it's working out. As long as I don't spill my coffee, it's working out okay. The reason that joke is available is that the alternate meaning is a legitimate interpretation of the English sentence. Another way of putting it is, another example to illustrate this is if your wait person says to you, would you like soup or salad? You can say, can I have both? It's a legitimate question because that's a possible interpretation. In any case, we don't allow that ambiguity into our pure logical language SL. We want clarity, so all the time, or means this or that or both. So here are the basic elements of our language SL. We have the sentence letters, we have the sentential connectives, and we have the parentheses. You put these together and you can translate ordinary English sentences into our abstract language. Okay, let's take a look at some more examples here. If you study, you will pass the test. This has two atomic statements in it. You will study for the test and you will pass the test. Notice that I've actually expanded you study a bit more when I write out the dictionary for A, just so it makes more sense as a standalone statement. All right, so this has two sections or two atomic statements. So we say that A comes first, that replaces you study, and B replaces you will pass the test. In this case, it says if A, then B, so you just place the arrow right between them. Straightforward. Now think about this sentence. You will pass the test if you study. This is basically the same sentence, but the if clause has migrated to the end of the sentence. This is because in English we can adjust word order all the time. So now when we're just writing down the letters, the B goes there and the A goes there. But the if statement, the word if is still introducing the A. So when we write it out as a symbolic statement, we write A implies B, A arrow B. So even though the English word order has shifted, the word if still introduces the antecedent. If you study, you will pass the test, and you will pass the test if you study are both represented as A implies B. Now think about the sentence, if you pass, you will pass the test only if you study. Now we've done more than just move the if clause to the end. We've added an only to it. And that means that there's no other way to pass the test besides studying. So when you do it like that, B is there and A is there. But now when you have this phrase only if, the arrow goes right down on top of the phrase only if. Only if reverses the direction of the arrow, and in this case that means you have B implies A. Another way of thinking about it is that if, the word if introduces the antecedent, and the phrase only if introduces the consequent. So if A, then B is represented A arrow B, or it could also be represented A only if B, because in the second sentence, the only if is introducing the consequent. Another way of thinking about this is to think about this in terms of what we call necessary and sufficient conditions. If A, then B is describing a sufficient condition. If you have A, you then have enough to get yourself a B. So it's like having 5 quarters and wanting to get a Snickers bar from the vending machine. 5 quarters is enough to get a Snickers bar from the vending machine. Only if is different. If I say A only if B, now B isn't a sufficient condition. It's a necessary condition. It's something I need, but I may also need to do other things. So actually having 5 quarters is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Or having $1.25 is necessary, but it's not sufficient because the vending machine must be in working order. So there's some other condition. So if A, then B is a sufficient condition. A only if B is a necessary condition. You put the two together in if and only if, and you have the double-headed arrow. All right, just for practice, try these. I recommend pausing the video, actually, and just writing them on a separate piece of paper. So here are the answers. You can retire if you are over 65. You are over 65 is the letter B. It is introduced by the word if. If introduces the antecedent, so that is B implies A. You can retire only if you are over 65. Gives you A implies B, because the only reverses the direction of the arrow. If you are over 65, then you can retire is B implies A again, exactly equivalent to number 1, and that's just because all you've done there is move the English phrase, if you are over 65, to the beginning of the sentence. You haven't changed the meaning of the sentence. You can retire if and only if you are over 65 and have enough money saved up. Now we've got the full phrase, if and only if, so we have the double-headed arrow. The other thing to see here is that the B and C have to be grouped together because they are two conditions that are both necessary and jointly sufficient to get A. The last one is a tricky thing to say in English, but it's actually easy to say in our symbolic language. You want to say that a conditional relationship does not exist. It is not the case that you can retire only if you have enough money saved up. There, you can retire only if you have enough money saved up is A implies C, and then the phrase, it is not the case that, negates the whole thing. So the placement of the parentheses are important there. All right, two other tricks to our symbolic language. But turns out to be just like and. So and but are both conjunctions. Or is a disjunction. This is because in English, both the word and but say that the two things that you're talking about are true. The word but, however, introduces, says that the next thing that's coming is surprising given the first thing, but it's still true. So if you say, those flowers are pretty, but they smell bad, the logical content is the same as those flowers are pretty and they smell bad. What's missing in the second sentence is an emotional contrast between a good thing and a bad thing, and that's one of the things that we leave behind when we move to our symbolic language. The last bit I want to point out is that the word unless turns out to be just like our disjunction or. So if I say A unless B, what I'm saying is A is true, and the only way to and we can avoid that if B is true, right? So that gives us A or B. So that's enough for now. So you've got your reading and you've got the set of exercises from chapter 4. And in this case, all of the exercises are about translating into our symbolic language, which is the main thing that you need to know for test 2, which is actually coming up at the end of this week.